Get out of here, you pathetic old woman. You're a nobody. The words sliced through the ballroom like a blade. My own daughter, Clara, spat them at me in front of 40 guests, her voice trembling with rage and disgust. Laughter and whispers rippled through the air as if humiliation was part of the entertainment that evening. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. I froze, my hands clutching the small blue Tiffany box I had brought as a gift. Inside lay a pearl necklace, chosen carefully on a trip to New York, meant to symbolize the years of sacrifice that had shaped her future. But in that moment, under the harsh gaze of her fiancé Julian, and the superior smirk of Barbara, his mother, the necklace felt like nothing more than a useless trinket. My simple brown dress suddenly weighed on me like armor from another age, my worn shoes sinking into the polished marble floor. I saw the way Clara's eyes swept over me, assessing me not as a mother, but as a stain upon her perfect new life. "This is an elegant event," she announced loudly. "Not everyone belongs here." The words landed like stones against my chest, but I said nothing. I simply nodded, forcing my voice to remain calm. "I just came to celebrate with you, sweetheart." My fingers brushed the Tiffany box again, as if holding on to the memory of a different Clara, the little girl who once wore ribbons in her hair, who once pressed her tiny hand into mine, and whispered that I was her best friend. But that little girl was gone. As I turned away from the circle of mocking eyes, memories surged like waves breaking against the shore. I remembered the endless nights in my 20s, working double shifts, selling my first condo to pay her Ivy League tuition. I remembered the coffee cup that had grown cold beside stacks of contracts, the photo frame on my desk with her kindergarten smile, the wedding ring I never replaced after losing her father's symbols of a life given entirely to her. And yet, here I was, discarded, as though those sacrifices meant nothing. I had lived quietly, hiding the truth of my success beneath modest clothes and a rented apartment. She thought I was a burden, a relic, a poor woman, clinging to relevance. She never knew about the empire I had built in silence, brick by brick, investment by investment, until it grew into $34 million spread across continents. That night, humiliation seared itself into my skin. But beneath the sting of shame, something stirred a fire, long buried under years of sacrifice. I walked out of the engagement party, carrying nothing but my purse and the weight of betrayal. The Tiffany box trembled in my hand, no longer a gift, but a symbol, a reminder. Clara believed she had erased me from her future. What she didn't know was that she had just awakened the part of me I had kept hidden for decades. The night after the engagement party, I sat alone in my apartment. The Tiffany box lay unopened on the table, its blue surface mocking me under the weak glow of the kitchen light. I had carried it there like a wound, and now I could not bring myself to look inside. Clara's words echoed endlessly in my ears. "You're a nobody." Neighbors in the building passed me in the hallway with sympathetic glances, though none dared ask what was wrong. I must have looked like a ghost. Shoulders bent, eyes hollow, clutching my purse, as if it were the only thing holding me together. At the corner store, the clerk, a boy barely older than my grandson would have been if I'd ever had one, asked if I was all right. I smiled politely, bought a carton of milk, and walked away without answering. In the mirror that evening, I saw not the strong woman who had built a company from scratch, but a tired old lady in a faded cardigan. And maybe that was the cruelest part. Clara had made me believe it. For the first time in years, I wondered if she was right, if perhaps I truly was nothing. But when I opened the drawer of my desk, the illusion cracked. Inside were the documents no one knew existed. Deeds to properties in London, Paris, and Miami. Stock certificates, bank statements, that together told a very different story. The numbers gleamed in black ink. Undeniable proof that I was not poor, not forgotten, not powerless. Still, I left them hidden. If Clara wanted to think of me as small, I would let her for now. The days that followed blurred together. I avoided calls from relatives, fearing questions about the engagement party. I walked through the market where old friends asked if I'd attend the wedding, and I simply shook my head. In whispers behind me, I heard pity, but I kept walking, clutching the straps of my purse tighter. At night, I dreamed of Clara as a little girl, running through our first apartment barefoot, her laugh echoing against the thin walls. In the dream, she turned to me with bright eyes and said, "Don't leave me, Mommy." I always woke up crying, the sound swallowed by the emptiness of my rented room. One morning, unable to bear the silence, I packed a small suitcase, just clothes, my passport, and the framed photo of Clara at age 6. The suitcase rolled across the cracked linoleum floor with a hollow rattle, a sound that made me realize something. I could leave. I did not have to stay where the walls were soaked with shame, so I booked a ticket. Switzerland. The chalet I had purchased years ago, as an investment now called to me as a refuge. The world thought I was defeated. My daughter thought she had erased me, but as the plane lifted from the runway and the city shrank beneath the clouds, I whispered to myself, "This isn't the end. It's the beginning." And somewhere deep inside, I knew Clara had not seen the last of me. The chalet in Switzerland greeted me like an old friend. Nestled in the Alps, it was all stone walls and wooden beams, the kind of place no one would associate with a pathetic old woman. Snow fell in gentle sheets outside the wide windows, blanketing the world in quiet. Inside, however, my mind roared. The first nights were restless. I would sit at the heavy oak table, staring at the photo of 6-year-old Clara that I had placed beside a candle. Her gap-toothed smile mocked the memory of the woman who had called me an embarrassment. I asked the empty room the question that gnawed at me. How did she forget everything I gave? I cooked simple meals, soups and bread, just enough to keep me alive, but my hunger was not for food. It was for clarity. One evening, as I stirred a pot of lentils, Maria, the housekeeper from Clara's home, called. Her voice trembled. "Mrs. Eleanor, I must tell you. Clara is saying things about you." My grip tightened on the spoon. "What things? That you ran away because you were poor? That you left to avoid debt collectors? Julian says you were a burden. And Barbara, she throws a party to celebrate you being gone." The wooden spoon cracked in my hand. So it was not enough to discard me. They needed to bury me under lies. In that moment, I realized silence would not protect me. It would only let them rewrite my story. I rang Arthur, my lawyer of 30 years, the man who knew every hidden ledger and account. "It's time," I told him. "I want everything in order. The deeds, the statements, the investments. We may need to show the world what I truly own." Arthur paused, his tone grave. "Are you ready to reveal it all?" "Not yet," I said coldly. "But I will be." Days turned into weeks. The snow outside grew deeper, but so did my resolve. Each morning, I opened the safe and spread the documents across the table, like a general preparing for war. The black ink of the numbers gleamed like weaponry. I was no longer the woman in the brown dress. I was the architect of a fortune, large enough to crush anyone who mocked me. One night, as I closed the safe, my phone buzzed again. It was Maria, whispering through static. "Clara is trying to sell your apartment, madam. She says you signed everything to her before leaving." Ah, the lie hit me harder than Clara's cruelest words. To steal from me with forged papers, that was not just betrayal. That was war. I hung up and stared at the photo of little Clara. The child in the picture did not know the storm her future self had unleashed. I blew out the candle, plunging the room into darkness, and whispered into the silence, "Enough." The next chapter of my life would not be about tears or memories. It would be about retribution. When the first blow lands, it should not shatter, it should whisper. I wanted Clara, Julian, and Barbara to feel the tremor before the earthquake. I returned quietly, slipping into the city like a shadow wrapped in silk. No announcements, no explanations, just presence. The Grand Boutique on Fifth Avenue was Barbara's hunting ground, the place where she paraded her status through racks of gowns she could barely afford. I chose that arena for my first strike. The moment I walked in, the sales staff straightened. A woman in her 70s with freshly cut silver hair, an Armani coat draped over her shoulders, and a black card in hand is not dismissed as a nobody. The manager approached instantly. "Madam, how may we assist you today?" "Show me your most exclusive collection," I said evenly. "Price is not an issue." I let the words hang in the air, sharp as glass. As they hurried to fetch trays of gowns and jewels, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Eleanor?" Barbara's tone cracked like porcelain. She stood frozen by the display case, her eyes wide, her lips twitching as if she had seen a ghost. I turned slowly, meeting her gaze with a calm smile. "Barbara, what a surprise." Her cheeks flushed. But Clara said you left, that you were broke? Living off loans? Hiding from debt?" I finished for her, tilting my head. Strange how stories travel. The manager returned with 3 dresses: Valentino, Versace, Chanel, each tagged higher than Barbara's annual income. I touched the fabrics delicately, then pointed. "I'll take them all. And your diamond set. Charge it to this." I slid the black card across the counter without blinking. The swipe of the machine was a thunderclap. Barbara's face drained of color. "Barbara," I said as I signed the slip, "when you see Clara, give her a message for me. Tell her the mother she discarded is back. And tell her that on her wedding day, she'll receive a gift she'll never forget." I left the boutique with my purchases and a trail of whispers behind me. Barbara's trembling hands clutched her phone by dinner. Clara would know I had returned. That was exactly what I wanted. Back at my hotel, Arthur was waiting. He placed a folder on the desk. "Julian's company is worse than we thought. 3 million in debt, suppliers threatening lawsuits. He was counting on Clara inheriting from you to cover his collapse." The irony was delicious. My daughter had thrown me away for wealth and status, yet she was about to marry ruin disguised in a tailored suit. I poured a glass of wine and stood by the window, watching the city lights. Let them believe I'm just here to shop. Let them whisper. By the time the wedding arrives, they'll know exactly who I am. The first strike was subtle, but the crack had formed. Soon, the whole facade would crumble. The day of Clara's wedding approached like a storm cloud. For weeks, she and Barbara had spread their lies that I was broke, that I had vanished in shame. They believed the story was finished. But I was the author, and I had not yet written the ending. Arthur and I met in the presidential suite of the Grand Palace Hotel. He laid out the arsenal across the mahogany table. Deeds to apartments in London and Miami, statements of investment accounts, photographs of Julian with his mistress, audio recordings of Clara mocking me to her friends. Each page, each file, was a blade sharpened for war. "Are you certain?" Arthur asked, his voice low. "Once this begins, there's no undoing it." I looked at the Tiffany box resting beside the papers, the same one Clara had dismissed without opening. "She closed the door on me," I said. "Now, I will show her what she locked out." We chose timing with precision. 2 o'clock, the exact hour Clara would walk down the aisle. While she posed beneath stained glass windows, I would face the city, the ballroom of the hotel filled with reporters, their cameras clicking like 1,000 tiny knives. When I stepped to the podium, silence fell. They did not see a pathetic old woman. They saw a figure in a black Armani gown, diamonds glinting under the chandeliers, eyes steady as steel. "My name is Eleanor," I began, my voice clear, "and I am the mother of today's bride." The murmurs started at once. I raised a hand, and the room obeyed. Over the past weeks, lies have been told that I am poor, that I abandoned my daughter, that I have no place in her new life. Today, I will show you the truth. I lifted the first folder. Deeds, bank statements, certificates. The numbers flashed across the screens as cameras zoomed in. I built a company worth $34 million. I sold it. I retired. I chose silence. But silence has been twisted into shame. Arthur stepped forward then, pressing a button on the speaker. Clara's laughter filled the room. "Thank God she's gone. She was so pathetic, always trying to impress with cheap gifts." Gasps rippled through the press, but I wasn't finished. "The man my daughter is marrying is bankrupt. He owes millions. He has forged her signature for loans, and he has betrayed her with another woman. I hold proof of it all." Cameras exploded. Questions surged, but I lifted my chin and spoke over them. A mother can forgive many things, but she cannot allow her child to be destroyed by lies and greed. My daughter cast me aside as an embarrassment. Today, she will learn the truth. I left the podium to a storm of flashes, my heels striking the marble like drumbeats of victory. At that very hour, in a church across town, Clara was supposed to be glowing with joy. Instead, the whispers had already begun. Guests checked their phones. The perfect wedding was unraveling before the vows were even spoken. The first curtain had fallen. The next would be the confrontation itself. Chaos moves faster than love. By the time Clara stepped out of the church with Julian's arm locked around hers, the world she thought she owned was already slipping through her fingers. Guests weren't clapping. They weren't throwing rice or snapping photographs. They were staring at glowing phone screens, mouths open, whispers spreading like wildfire through the crowd. 34 million. Her mother. Bankrupt husband. Mistress. The words flew like arrows in the cold afternoon air. Barbara rushed forward, her face pale. "Clara, darling, we have to talk." "Not now," Clara hissed, clutching her bouquet as if the roses could shield her. But her eyes darted from one guest to another, catching their pitying stares. It was a look she had once reserved for me. Inside the limousine, Julian's hands trembled. He yanked at his tie, sweat soaking through his designer suit. "What the hell did your mother do? She's bluffing!" Clara snapped, though her voice wavered. "She doesn't have anything. She's poor, Julian. Poor." Julian's phone buzzed. He snatched it up, his face blanching as he read the headline. "Mother of the bride exposes multimillion dollar fortune and SONINL. A was bankruptcy." A photograph of me in my Armani gown stared back at him, diamonds flashing under hotel lights. I looked powerful. I looked untouchable. "This can't be happening," he muttered. "How did she—" "Shut up!" Clara screamed, but the panic in her eyes betrayed her. Back at the hotel, I sat calmly with Arthur, sipping tea as if the world outside wasn't on fire. Maria called from the church, her voice hushed, but trembling. "Mrs. Eleanor? It's madness. People are leaving. They're whispering that Julian is ruined. Clara is shouting at Barbara. The reception. What about it?" I asked. "Cancelled," Maria replied. "They can't face the guests. Everyone is going home." I set my teacup down gently. The porcelain didn't rattle. My hand was steady now. "Good." Let the lies collapse before dessert is served. Arthur leaned back, his eyes on me. You've already destroyed the wedding. Do you want to press further? I smiled, cold and thin. Oh, Arthur, the wedding was only the prelude. The real performance hasn't even begun. Later that evening, as the city lights flickered against my window, I wrote 3 letters. One to Clara, a mirror of her cruelty, reminding her of the words she had spat at me. One to Julian, evidence of his fraud, every debt neatly listed like a noose tightening. And one to Barbara, a simple line, you told me to know my place. I do. It is above you. When the letters were sealed, I placed the Tiffany box beside them. The necklace inside gleamed under the lamplight. Once, it was a gift of love. Now, it was a weapon of memory. Clara had made her choice. Tomorrow, she would see the price. The knock came just past midnight. Not polite, not hesitant, furious. The kind of knock that wanted to break doors down. Arthur, sitting in the armchair with a folder on his lap, raised an eyebrow. Do you want me to handle this? No, I said, smoothing the silk of my gown. It's time. I opened the door to find Clara in her wedding dress. Mascara streaking her cheeks, bouquet wilted in her fist. Behind her, Julian loomed like a man cornered, his tie undone, his eyes bloodshot. They pushed past me without waiting for permission. How could you do this to me? Clara screamed, spinning on her heels. You ruined my wedding. You humiliated me in front of everyone. I closed the door softly, the latch clicking like a final verdict. Curious, I said calmly. A few weeks ago, you told me I was an embarrassment, that I didn't belong in your life. And now my absence is the tragedy? Julian stepped forward, fists clenched. You had no right airing private matters. Private? I cut him off, my voice sharp as glass. You mean your bankruptcy? Your mistress? The loans you forged in Clara's name? Those are crimes, Julian, not secrets. Clara's head whipped toward him. What loans? His lips parted, but no words came. I reached for the folder Arthur had prepared, sliding it across the table. Perhaps you'd like to explain these contracts, signed with your wife's name. 5 million in liabilities, all neatly waiting for her signature at the notary's office. Tomorrow, wasn't it? Clara's face drained of color. Julian, tell me this isn't true, he stammered, sweat rolling down his temple. It's business. You wouldn't understand. I pressed another button. The television flickered on, showing the private investigator's video. Julian in a sleek restaurant, lips locked with a young woman in a red dress. The silence that followed was suffocating. Clara covered her mouth, the bouquet tumbling to the carpet. You're lying, she whispered, but her eyes never left the screen. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so it cut deeper. No, Clara, he is lying. To you, about everything. You traded your mother for this man, and this is what he truly island. Julian lunged toward the remote, but Arthur blocked him, calm as a stone wall. Tears streaked down Clara's face. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I looked at her, my daughter, trembling in silk and shame, and felt the old ache stir. But I buried it beneath the ice. You told me I was no longer part of your life. Tonight, I'm simply honoring your wish. The suite fell silent, broken only by Clara's sobs and the dull thud of Julian collapsing into a chair. I poured myself a glass of wine, the stem steady in my hand. This is only the beginning, I said quietly. And tomorrow, the world will see even more. Morning arrived without ceremony, pale light seeping through the curtains of the suite. Clara was gone. She had stumbled out some time before dawn, veil torn, shoes in her hands, looking less like a bride and more like a fugitive. Julian remained, slumped in a chair, face buried in his hands. When the police arrived at Arthur's call, he barely resisted. Fraud, forgery, embezzlement. The charges fit around him like shackles long prepared. By noon, the scandal had swallowed the city. Headlines blared across every screen. Bride's mother reveals $34 in fortune. SONINLAW. Exposed as bankrupt cheat. Guests who had once toasted Clara now erased her number from their phones. Barbara, desperate to salvage her own reputation, issued a statement disowning both Julian and Clara, calling them naive and misguided. The woman who told me to know my place had abandoned her own blood to keep her seat at the table. Maria called again, her voice thick with pity. Mrs. Eleanor, Clara has been crying all morning. She says her friends won't speak to her. The vendors are demanding payment, and Barbara has locked her out of the family estate. I listened in silence, then replied, Actions carry weight, Maria. Even words, once spoken, never vanish. That afternoon, I walked through the park, unseen among strangers. A group of women on a bench whispered over the tabloid spread, my photograph bold against the headline. She looks magnificent, one said. Imagine her daughter called her pathetic. Their voices held no pity for Clara, only awe for me. It was not triumph I felt, but something colder. Justice. By evening, Clara found me. She stood at the doorway of my suite, hair disheveled, eyes swollen. Mom, please. Her voice cracked like thin glass. I was wrong. I was blind, forgive me. I regarded her quietly. She looked so small now, stripped of finery and friends, yet still clutching at me as if my love could erase her ruin. Slowly, I shook my head. You wanted a life without me, I said, each word deliberate. And now you have it. Tears streamed down her face. But I'm your daughter. I set down my glass, rising with measured calm. I was your mother for 30 years. When I sold my condo for your tuition. When I stayed up through the nights to build a future you never lacked. And when you humiliated me. When you told me I was a nobody. You ended that chapter. You buried it with your own hands. Clara fell to her knees, clutching the hem of my gown. I have no one else. For a flicker of a moment, I saw the child in the photo frame, the 6-year-old with ribbons in her hair. But the image shattered under the weight of betrayal. I freed my gown gently from her grasp. You said I was the past, I whispered. So that is where I'll remain. Clara's sobs echoed in the hall long after I closed the door. Inside, the silence was heavy, but it was mine. For the first time, I felt the distance between love and self-respect, and I chose the latter. 6 months passed. The scandal that had once filled every front page had quieted, but its ashes clung stubbornly to Clara's life. She rented a small apartment on the edge of town, a far cry from the glittering halls she once paraded through. Julian rotted in prison, shouting threats no one listened to. Barbara pretended she had never known them. The world had moved on except Clara, who carried the weight of her choices like stones in her chest. As for me, I lived in Switzerland, in my chalet where the snow softened the world into silence. My days were measured not by shame or betrayal, but by choice. I curated art, walked the mountains, and invested quietly, my fortune growing past 50 million. The solitude was not loneliness, it was sovereignty. One evening, as twilight draped the Alps in violet shadows, I unlocked the drawer of my writing desk. Inside lay the Tiffany box, still pristine, still blue, the necklace untouched, since the night Clara dismissed it. I lifted it gently, the satin ribbon cool between my fingers. For a long time I stared at it, remembering how I once chose it as a symbol of love, how I had carried it like an offering, only to have it dismissed like trash. Now, it meant something else entirely. I placed the box on the table beside my journal. In its reflection, I no longer saw rejection. I saw survival, strength, the reminder that the woman who was humiliated in a brown dress had been reborn into someone who could command boardrooms, silence liars, and close doors without hesitation. Maria still called from time to time. Her last message had been simple. Clara asks every day if you'll ever forgive her. I never answered. Some wounds are not meant to be soothed. Some lessons must scar to be remembered. That night, as I prepared for bed, I carried the Tiffany box to the balcony. The cold air wrapped around me, crisp and sharp. Below, the valley glittered with lights from distant villages, each one a tiny reminder that life goes on, with or without reconciliation. I opened the box one last time, let the pearls catch the moonlight, and then closed it with a decisive snap. The box is the same, I whispered to the mountains, but I am not. I turned, walked back inside, and closed the balcony door. The sound echoed through the room, final and absolute. It was the same gesture Clara had once made when she shut me out of her life, but the meaning had changed. Then, it was humiliation. Now, it was freedom. I placed the box back into the drawer, locked it, and set the key aside. Not hidden, not forgotten, simply finished. The story had come full circle, not as Clara imagined, but as I chose. And this time, I was the one closing the door. So that's the truth of how betrayal almost destroyed everything, until silence and strength turned the story around. But there's one thing I didn't tell you at the start. What if the betrayal wasn't just about money, but about love, power, and a secret no one expected? Click on this video here if you want to hear the next story of family, betrayal, and revenge. I'll see you in the next one. End of quote. 1. Quote. WW. 1. Click on this video here